Hello, everyone. I am here on this special day, my birthday, with my Aunt Kate, who has labeled herself perfectly Aunt Kate. And Aunt Kate is my mother's younger sister, and she was a huge inspiration for me growing up. I think that I am a writer today because of her. I used to go and spend time, weekends, weeks at her house and play with her old typewriter and go to her writers group. So, welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
So, back then, you were not yet published and you were just continuing to write, and you held on to that dream. You just kept going, even though it was a long road. That must have been really hard.
Yeah, I know. It's something I really wanted to do. If I just didn't feel so much like I wanted to get these stories out, the discipline of all that was something that I wanted. And I was just hoping eventually I would get published, but I never knew if I would.
Yeah.
And it actually didn't happen until till 2016, when I retired from my full-time job.
Was that a coincidence, or was that like, okay, now I have the time and energy to focus on finding a publisher?
Well, I think it was a little of both. I'd gone to a lot of writers' conferences, and I had a good bunch of nice with a lot of writers. And what happened was, one of the people who I worked at a library at the college I graduated from, Worcester State College. And one of the teachers there, who I used to talk to about writing, because she liked writing mysteries, and she was trying to get published. She'd had like things published, academic things, but she was trying to get her mystery novel published. And she told me that she had, that there was a small press that had accepted it, and she recommended me to them. And that was just before that I retired. And they accepted my novel, and it was thrilling.
Oh my gosh, the power of networking. It's so important.
Yes.
Getting to know people and people in your field.
And you talking to people, right, for so many years.
You had a manuscript ready at that point, right?
Yes. I had been working on it since like the first novel I got published. I'd been working on since 1999, because part of it takes place March of 1999 to March of 2000. And I wanted to get a first draft done about 2000, before the year 2000, strangely enough. So I had workshopped it over the, a couple of decades, and changed it a lot. But this particular place, this particular publisher want a couple of chapters, because how they do things is, if they accept your manuscript, they will do the editing, and they do all the artwork for the cover and all the design work. And I've been very happy with that. And then you buy the copies at half price. They're on Amazon if anybody wants to buy them that way, a couple of other places. But basically, the way I kind of break even, the last one I probably made a few $100s on. I guess I get better at selling them. What happened was, I would buy like 50 copies at half price from the publisher, and then I would do talks and sell my books at the talks, at senior centers, at libraries, and yeah, so that was really kind of fun. So I've gotten 2 books published through them, and I have I basically buy the books and then I sell them for whatever, and I've been real happy with their design and stuff and with the editing.
Awesome.
Hmm.
That is
Yeah.
great.
Hmm.
How do you pitch yourself for these events? When you look for a place, is it like, hi, I wrote a
Okay.
book,
Hmm.
or I wrote a book
Yeah.
that is relevant to your people because
Yes. Right. All my novels, I'm working on my 3rd one, at least have some place near where I grew up in Worcester, Massachusetts. So I do use that in my pitch. It's local. Um,
Mhm.
some of the things, like in my first novel, a couple of the scenes take place at Worcester State in the 1970s. And then I made up another college in Worcester that my um, other character worked at in 1999. It was called Worcester University. And of course, now it's called Worcester University. So that's kind of confusing. But yes, one is that it's local. And I
Mhm.
pitched that it's the last one I did was a mystery. So I pitched that big. And the mystery that I did, the second one that I got published, was very loosely based on a true story that happened right outside Worcester in the 1890s. So there I had the historical and the place. So I did a lot of research of Worcester in the 1890s. So that's part of my talk. And also the kind of funny is the second one that I got published, um, I actually began that in the early 90s on a typewriter and etc. And then I went back to it after I get the first one published. I thought, well, I had about 100 pages, and I thought, well, maybe it's worth going back and looking at and turning into something that could be published. And so then I started working on that. So when I did my talk, I had my manuscript pages all wrapped up. This is what it looked like when I started it, which was a lot different than, what we do on the computers now.
That's really interesting. I did not know that. I
Yes.
thought, to me, it looked like, okay, you spent like 16 years working on one book, and then the next book was like, okay, I've
Yeah.
got it.
Well, that second book was written, like I said, it began in the early 90s with about 100 pages, kind of seated there, and then I, expanded it and rewrote it into a mystery.
And now you're working on a third book.
I'm
What is
working
that
on a third
process?
book. I've been working on it for about 3 years, and I feel like I'm almost done it. It again, parts of it take place in Worcester. In it takes place mostly in 1939. A part
Sorry,
in
can you say the date
Worcester,
again?
1939.
1939. Okay.
And the part in Worcester is called Grace Above the Lake, right? And the lake is Lake Quinsig in Worcester, which is on the Worcester-Shrewsbury line. And I was a kid. I used to go to an amusement park there called White City. And it had been going on from like 1910 to 1960. It closed down. But when we were kids, we went there. So part of it takes place at White City in 1939.
You must do a lot of research for these historical books, and your
I
career as a
do. I
librarian
do.
probably helped with that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just really like doing the historical research. Um, and the thing about the one I'm working on now is I it starts out a part of the story starts out in 1939 on the Worcestershire line at White City, and it's a trail that travels from Worcester to where they wintered, Florida. So there's something that there was a tradition that they did in the carnivals, and I don't know if it was the first night or something like that. They would gather and tell. So I have stories within stories, and the stories are about a lot of them about things that happened. There was a huge hurricane that went up the East Coast in 1938. So in 1939, when the carnivals were traveling down there, the coastline changed. It even it went up the Connecticut River into Western Mass and destroyed the bandstand at the Big E. That's how ferocious it was. And it changed the whole line all the way up through Maine. One of the stories is about, because a lot of people, like, it was traumatic for them, and it had only been a year before. So I have all these stories within stories, which I really like to do.
I feel like you have connected me with my past in a way that nobody else does, because our family are not in general big storytellers. They're kind of like, yeah, that thing happened in the past, let's not talk about it. And because your parents were older, and my parents were older when they had me, I felt like I was disconnected in a lot of ways from those stories of heritage. But you traveled back to Ireland a few times, and you write poetry about our family history as well. And it's really neat to have that thread.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So I think it's really nice to have somebody in the family who is the keeper of the stories. Did you always feel like that was your role? Like, when did you start feeling inspired to do that?
Yeah. Maybe the first time I went to Ireland, I lived there for a year in 1975, 76. And I think the year I lived there, I came back with a lot, whether it was about Ireland or not. I came back with a lot of stories in my head. And your grandma and grandpa, my mom and dad, were big storytellers, both of them.
Really?
Yeah. I can tell you that your grandpa, of course, there was no television and stuff when they were growing up. So one of the things they did for entertainment down New Bedford in the Cape when Grandpa was little is they would all be sitting in the kitchen, the different generations. He was a kid, and they had to like perform something. Everybody had to do something. Like they had to sing a song or tell a story or whatever. They had times like that. And so I heard him talking about those times. I mean, one of his grandfathers, his skill was something like he could balance 2 chairs on his shoulder. So it was like whatever you could do is what you did. And of course, Grandpa being a little boy was very impressed by this skill more than any of the poetry or singing or anything. So it's like what people did before there was television and video and stuff. And of course, Grandma, of course, coming from rural Ireland in the first part of the 20th century, again, they told stories for entertainment. So I picked up on a lot of that because I guess I just liked it. I liked songs and I liked stories. And when I was even preschool. And so I kind of glommed onto all that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Grandparents, I wish I had held on to some of their stories. I wish I had heard some of their stories. As I said earlier, my grandma and grandpa passed away when I was like 11 or 12.
That's right. Yeah.
So I really missed out on being old enough to understand their stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Grandma, I know she loved to read because you told me about how she taught herself to read as
Yes.
3 years old.
Yeah, she was very young. In rural Ireland, there weren't a lot of books around, so she used to read whatever was available, like the newspaper from her neighbor, the English newspaper.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that is
Yeah.
cool. So those
Hmm.
those threads are in there somewhere that I
Yes, they
picked up
are.
on as
Yep.
well.
Hmm. They continue to be. And I think that most stories really do come from, whatever your family is, whatever nationality your family is, that's where most stories come from.
Mm.
They come from what you heard when you were growing up, really.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think as writers we as humans,
Yeah.
there's so much of our beliefs and our thoughts and our stories that come from when we're really young and
Yeah.
impressionable.
Uh-huh. And we listen. There are some people who listen more than others. It's kids who listen more than others. You know, it's
Yeah.
whatever you're fascinated with. And I was always very audio. Like I didn't notice my surroundings so much, but I could always hear what was going
Mm.
on. And I think that a lot of people who write are like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Interesting. When did you first start going to the Mount Monadnock? I can't say that.
Yeah.
Pronounce it.
The Monadnock Writers Group. We moved up here to Winchendon, Mass, which is on the border of New Hampshire. Monadnock Mountain is just in southern New Hampshire near us. So I started going there when we moved up here in 1988.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got a lot of fellowship there, and I still do have fellowship with writers I met there. I go every year. I didn't the last couple of years because of the pandemic. I went last year, and this year I'm going to Ireland again. So I'm not going this year, but every year there's a group that meets at a place in southern New Hampshire for a weekend. Poets and novelists and people who are doing memoir, mostly poets, but they're people I've known for a lot of years now, and it's small and it's very enriching because I've known the people for a long time, and it's not very competitive, and it's a lot of fun. So I will miss going there this year, but I'm going to Ireland, so
Yeah, it's quite worth it.
yeah, I'll go again next year.
That's awesome. I hope you come
Yeah.
back with lots of stories again.
I hope so. Hmm.
So the publisher that you're with doesn't have requirements for you, right? It's not like, and you need to have a book every this many years.
No, the publisher wants the entire manuscript, and they look at it and they determine if they're going to publish it. And yeah, you don't have to have a book every so many. It's when your manuscript is ready, you send it to them and they accept it or not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. So it's pretty straightforward and easy that way.
That
As
makes
far as,
sense.
yeah. I mean, I've tried probably a couple of decades ago. I tried to get published with, um, you know, other more well-known publishers, and I went to some writing workshops and everything, but I never got a connection.
Mm.
So, you know, and that's changed so much now. It's like unbelievable.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
hard to break into those big six. It was then, it is
Yes.
now. But there's so many smaller publishers,
Right.
so
Hmm. There
it
are a
depends
lot of
on
different choices.
your goals and what you want your book to do.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Hmm.
What advice would you give for people who are just still like, I'm writing and I'm writing and I don't know if I'll ever be able to share it with the world?
Yeah. Um, if you have a story that you feel is important, you you need to put it out in words. And, you know, if you end up sharing it with the world, I mean, like I said, it took a few decades for me to share a couple of my stories with the world. And, you know, you can go to small presses that, you know, like I said, like the one that there's other small presses than the one I went through, that I go through, that they will they'll pay the editing, they'll do the design. I've been very happy with the designs of the books. If you want, I'll show you the covers. I've been real happy with the design covers. And then, like I said, you don't make a lot of money. You I think the first one I just kind of broke even with. And the second one, I still had a bunch left that I hadn't sold from when the second one came out. And I sold them when I was talking about my second one. So that was kind of cool. So I ended up probably,
I think, the case
making about $400 or so. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but, you know, your stuff is out there. People read it. Your friends and your relatives read it, and other people who you meet at the libraries. And, you know, that's satisfying for me. So do you want me to show you the covers for my book? This was the one that got, this is called Through a Bakery Window. Okay, let me get this right. And this is the cover for the book that came out a couple of years ago. And this is the book that came out in 2016. It's called Sleepwalking Backwards. And actually, this is, as you know, my husband is an astronomy buff. And there's a couple of people in his group that do astrophotography. And these are actual photographs from the astrophotographers. Another good thing about not going with a big publisher is I sent in pictures. I said, I'd like you to use these if you can on the cover. And they did. You know, they're very open to that.
Lovely.
So you have more say in the design, too. As a matter of fact, they like you to have say in the design. One of the things, if you do want to get published, to try to get, one of the things that will happen, like even with a small press like Touchpoint, after you sign the contract, they'll send you several pages where they want to know about the main character. You know, you have to think about putting the main character, what's the story about, like a short, small and short blurbs about the story and about the characters, because when they're thinking about how they want to design the covers and stuff, they want to know what the story's about, what the character's about, and that helps them. So once you sign a contract with them, you're going to have to start pulling your book story apart and doing blurbs about it for them, and so that they can do better. And so, because they can do a little bit of, you know, they will send like press kits out to some places. Like if you give them a list of people who in institutions that might be interested, they'll send press kits out there. And I even went to a small bookstore to my last one. I went to a small bookstore to read from it, and I didn't realize they must have seen that I once before did a workshop there or whatever, and they had already sent a copy of it with a press kit. So that was good to know that they can do a little, but not a lot. So being my age, it's a little hard. I don't have a lot of platforms. The more platforms you have online, the more you're going to.
You don't have 1 million followers on TikTok?
No, I have no. I'm not on TikTok. I do have a website, and you know, I'm on Facebook. But you know, you sell a lot more books if you have platforms, and I don't really have a lot, but a lot of people do.
It's still about having those communities of people that will be interested in the subject of your book.
That's very true. Yes. Very true.
So whether that's in person or online, you still want to be in those kind of communities.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That is so cool. All right, one last question.
All right.
When you go and do an event, you do like a reading from your books, right?
Yes.
How do you choose which section to read?
Let's see. I usually do some historical stuff, and I want to pull out something that's kind of dramatic, that doesn't need the whole story to get somebody's interest, but is going to get somebody's interest. Maybe something that might have some amusement and some mystery in it. Definitely something that will have some mystery in it, like where is this going? And sometimes it depends on where I am. I did some readings at Worcester State, and of course I use the places at Worcester State, so it depends on location. And if there is not a location involved, I want to pull something out that will spark people's interest and be a more exciting, and probably more a little bit of the characters doing something, and maybe a little bit of contemplation, but mostly action, because I want, in a short period, I've got to get people interested in the characters.
And they tell you at the event, like, you have 10 minutes to speak, or...
Yeah. I've had some like that, like panels, but I did a lot of events where I could speak for like 30 minutes. So that was really good, because, I would do a reading from the book, but at first I would talk, especially the last one, about the historical backdrop of it. And about writing in general. People ask a lot of questions about writing in general when I'm at them.
That makes sense. Yeah. If you're going to events with authors, you're probably somebody who's very curious about the writing process.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So if anyone's really interested in these books, you can look up Catherine Zebrowski on Amazon.
Yes. And the name of one of them, the first one is called Sleepwalking Backwards. And the second one is Through a Bakery Window.
Lovely. Awesome. I am so glad that you were able to come join me today.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to wrap things up there. You hold tight for a moment while I